Who votes UKIP? Nigel Farage's party could have a big influence on the election, but will it cost Labour or the Conservatives more dearly? We'll also ask which West Country seats will be most heavily affected. Here to discuss that are our two guests today. They are the Conservative MP for Kingswood, that's Chris Skidmore, and the UKIP candidate for Weston-super-Mayor, Ernie Warrender. Welcome to you both. The news has been dominated this week by immigration. Nigel Farage has done away with his targets of 50,000, limiting immigration to 50,000. Why is that? Is UKIP chickening out?
Certainly not. What it is really, what UKIP's always been about is telling the truth and telling it as it is. OK, well, tell us. What's the numbers? When we get MPs, and we will get undoubtedly MPs into Westminster this time, and we will campaign for our referendum, until the time that that referendum achieves its aim, there is nothing anyone can do about immigration. Immigration is supply and demand. You know, we say that we need skill sets. OK, but why did you have a figure of 50,000 then which you abandoned? Initially, it was felt to be achievable, and now we realise that even if we get our vote, as and when we get our vote, it's still going to take a while to disengage from the EU. So it was misleading to have had that target in the first place? No, that's harsh. No, it wasn't misleading. It was a target that we... You just said you can't keep it. We couldn't believe the amount of immigration that's happened, and I think that's fair comment from anybody over the past 2-3 years. But you've got no idea of what you could guide it down to? Yes, we do, because it's basically what we want is a points-based system. Yeah, but you haven't given us a figure. Well, you can't give a figure on it, can you? Because we want a points-based system to satisfy the skills that are needed in the UK. All right, well, let's talk about the Conservative position, where, you know, it's been admitted that complete failure to meet your immigration targets. Why was that?
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with trying as hard as possible and not succeeding. And I was brought up to try and try and try again, which is what I hope the Conservative Party will do. You know, contrast that with 10 years of unlimited immigration under the Labour Party. When Gordon Brown
about your promise,
when Gordon Brown turned around and claimed that people who talked about immigration
Prime Minister said no ifs, no buts, immigration will come down.
Yeah, we have not succeeded. That is absolutely right. But
now, everyone expects UKIP to have their best ever general election. Opinion polls put their support at around 15%. In parts of the West, it's even higher. So we decided to take a closer look at how things stand in Kingswood, where Chris is the Tory MP with a small majority. UKIP is campaigning hard there, and we joined them down the pub. Here's Paul Baltrop.
Kingswood has swung back and forth between Labour and the Conservatives since its creation 40 years ago. It's a mixture of traditional urban working-class suburbs, more middle-class modern housing estates. It's not a top target seat for UKIP, but with one constituency poll showing them on 23%, the votes they get here could have a big impact on the results. Newly selected candidate is targeting Labour and the Tories.
It's actually both parties are being squeezed by UKIP, and both parties are worried of what we can do here. If we can get 23% UKIP supporters in Kingswood with no candidate selected, what's going to happen in a week or two once people know who I am, see my face and hear what I've got to say?
So what are the political origins of UKIP's new sympathisers? Opinion pollsters asked the party's supporters nationally who they'd backed in 2010. 45% had voted Conservative, 14% Liberal Democrat, 14% were UKIP back then, while only 10% had been Labour voters. This pattern's borne out on the streets of Kingswood.
Normally vote for Tories, and I vote UKIP.
Usually Conservative, UKIP.
I went for Lib Dems last time, probably go for UKIP this time.
Last election I voted for Labour. This election I'm voting for UKIP.
Conservative last time, and few time undecided, could be UKIP.
Experts must gauge whether they'll still feel that way on polling day.
Well, this is the million-dollar question. What we know from all the data that we look at is that UKIP support generally is quite strong amongst the old Labour votes. So it's people that have been completely disillusioned with the Labour Party, and that is fairly solid, actually. It's the Conservative vote that is a little bit weaker. There's a potential much more for switchback from UKIP to the Conservatives.
Chris Skidmore is duly elected for the
Kingswood's result was one of the moments of the 2010 election. It'll be in the spotlight this time too, not just for how UKIP do, but for who they undo.
You both talk quite a lot about Europe, but people don't really care about it, do they, as an issue?
Well, I think Europe and immigration are two sides of the same coin. What people want is a system that means that if people work hard and pay their taxes, that and they contribute, that then they get good healthcare services, good schools, everything that goes with that. What they're frustrated by is obviously, and this is where Europe links in very importantly and immigration links in, if people haven't paid their taxes, they haven't contributed, then why should they be allowed to get on the housing list, get council houses? Why should they be allowed access to healthcare? And that's where it all links into public services and that argument very importantly.
What's UKIP's view? I mean, because even a lot of UKIP supporters, according to the research I've seen, don't put leaving the EU as a high priority.
No, I think what they put is not paying 50 or 60 million quid a day into basically a failing club when our health service, as you've touched upon, our education systems, our infrastructure, all need massive investments. And then you had the Liberal Democrat spokesman on health, Norman, I forget his surname, saying that he needed £1.5 billion for the health service or it would implode. And a couple of weeks later, his beloved EU sent us a random bill for £1.7 billion.
What would be the biggest single drawback, do you think, of leaving the EU?
I can't think of one, David.
You'd be campaigning to keep Britain in.
In all honesty, I'm not sure yet where I would stand on that in-out referendum decision. If we don't renegotiate on issues of welfare, on issues of freedom of movement, then I may vote to come out. But I need to really think hard about this.
45% of UKIP voters, or people who intend to vote UKIP, voted Conservative last time. Now, that could really damage you, couldn't it?
Well, it could do, especially when Kingswood is one of those seats that will decide the general election, whether we have David Cameron as Prime Minister or Ed Miliband as Prime Minister. So there is a risk that, obviously, if people voted Conservative at UKIP, Labour will come through the middle and you'll have Ed Miliband as Prime Minister. That is obviously a risk, and I will be campaigning against that.
Why do that when Conservatives are offering an in-out referendum, which is what you want, and yet by standing against candidates like this, you're likely, or more likely, to see a Labour Prime Minister, and Labour have said no referendum?
Is that a cast iron guarantee of a referendum or a no ifs or no buts guarantee? I think most people now have a fundamental mistrust of politicians, and what UKIP bring to the table is honesty, openness. Certainly when I campaign out and around in Weston-super-Mare, it's an issue. No, I don't think, to tell someone, well, we're not terribly good, but we're better than the other people, isn't a great campaigning strength, to be honest. Let us put people in Parliament who are best fitted for the job.
You've said a referendum, whether or not negotiations succeed.
I mean, we're the one party that's actually said, why can't we trust the people? It's been 40 years before I was born since people had the opportunity. I don't think UKIP are actually offering a referendum. You're just saying you'll pull out full stop.
No, we've always said we want our say. We want a referendum. That is what we want. It's called democracy.
Come back us.
OK, thank you. Now, how big is your battle bus? No, we haven't morphed into Top Gear, but we thought we would take a look at the vehicles the parties will be using on the campaign trail. Here's Robin Markwell.
I saw quite a crime, but I'm out on the road again. I'm on the road again.
Back on the political highway. Whatever the party, whatever the era, no election campaign is complete without a shiny new bus.
The battle bus and its little tail of police and newsmen has already clocked up 6,000 miles, taking the steel message personally to the target seats.
On board, leaders put finishing touches to speeches before emerging in yet another town.
Mr. Steele's one concession to gimmickry, the bright orange battle bus, has often proved as big an attraction as the man himself.
But now buses come in all shapes, sizes and shades. Pink and proud has been the message from Labour. The Deputy Leader's controversial minibus has been a deliberate attempt to target undecided female voters. For UKIP in Weston-super-Mare, the local candidate has chosen a vintage Bentley as his campaign vehicle. He hopes his sorties around town will bring Conservative hopes of keeping the seat to a juddering halt. It's just one of 20 classic cars in his collection. He says he won't be outpinked by Labour with this Morris Minor.
The taxi.
A London cab is his daily runaround.
If this brings a smile to people's face, I don't care what they say, because I think that's a little bit more important than sitting there dull as ditch water.
And what does Party HQ make of it?
No comment.
So what cars should our politicians be driving? What about this gentleman here?
Yeah. What about him?
It's a decision we put to the voting public at the Haynes International Motor Museum in Somerset.
Well, he should have a Bentley Azure.
Because?
Gentleman's car.
Oh, difficult one, because it's very hard to drive with a pint pot in your hand.
Mr. Clegg. Again, something to carry the kids around. People carrier.
Well, they've got to go for what's the most... an electric car.
I've seen the Sinclair C5 just there.
That would be ideal.
Oh, he shouldn't be allowed to drive a car. Sorry, should I say that?
Getting the right blend of style and substance for your target voter is a big decision for any motoring politician. Will have to be robust too, as the gloves come off in the closest campaign for a generation.
Clive Evans said that politics was about priorities, and the Labour Party's priority is to have a pink bus. My priorities are very different. I believe in sort of going out and focusing on the issues and the policies, rather than having this sort of razzmatazz or showbiz of, you know, having a bus driven around the rest of the country.
What about your Bentley? I mean, what does that say to people?
I dread to think.
Struggling with the cost of living, and they've got the local candidate going around in a lovely vintage car.
The local candidate who's in a squat 30 years ago, it shows you can make it in this country. You can do it if you graft. And also, I think UKIP have got... We don't have to go out and advertise for females. We don't have to have ladies-only lists. We've got more elected female MEPs than anyone else, bar Labour, who have an exclusive list for women.
Does your car make up for the lack of detail in any sort of manifesto?
Oh, harsh. We have...
It's not as honest as it.
I'll take that as a yes.
Oh, certainly not. Absolutely not. We've published... What we've done, we said we would put the manifesto out early. We now realise it's probably not the cleverest thing to do because people are fairly uninterested in the election at the moment. It is building, and we want the other parties to be able to write their own manifesto, not pinch bits from ours. We parked that car, and 8, 10, 12 people come round me in one go.
Not traffic wardens, I hope.
Well,
Thanks very much.
Thank
you. Thousands have signed a petition against planned cuts to school music services in Wiltshire. From September, the County Council is likely to stop organising music tuition. Campaigners fear poorer children will suffer. And Bristol's Deputy Mayor has rebelled against George Ferguson over planned cuts to the city's library service. Jeff Gollop refused to support proposals to close 7 branches and cut more than £1 million from the budget. But let's talk about cuts and austerity. You're two different parties, but you're both joined at the hip on austerity, aren't you? UKIP first.
No, we're joined at the hip with common sense. We're massively over-governed, David. I mean, the sheer cost of governing ourselves, paying for all these unelected bureaucrats all the way through to Brussels. There is austerity and there is common sense. And I think that's what the UKIP stand for. That's what we stand for.
I think if you're talking about joined at the hip, all major parties now recognise we'll have to be making cuts in the next 5 years. The Labour Party, the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats all voted together to make sure that centrally we would cut £30 billion.
Difficult to know where UKIP stands, really, because, you know, in most cases I guess you'd be against cuts, but also perhaps in favour of tax cuts too.
Well, firstly, touching base on this, we've got a thing called the minimum wage. Well, if it's the minimum wage, why tax it? If it's the minimum, it's the minimum. And that's what we say. We say that the minimum wage will be set, it's about 13.3 at the moment per annum. Okay. That is where the tax will come in. You know, that makes sense.
All right, thank you very much.